500 years ago this month, Martin Luther sparked a movement that turned the world upside down. All that we have and the very way we think today stems from the Reformation he initiated. Luther's ideas remain as powerful today as they were in his time. He once said, "Whatever your heart clings to and confides in, that is really your God." Now's the time to remember and to reflect, not simply because there's a famous person we should honor, but because the values he embodied speak clearly to us about who we are and call us to think about how we engage with the world around us. The need for each one of us to stand up and show courage, to speak for what is right, is as strong now as it ever was. The world cannot be the place we long for it to be without each of us playing our part in contributing to it being so. Luther was faced with this choice when his ideas were put to the ultimate test. His calls for change angered the powerful ruling elite of the time and the superpower of the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church. And they demanded that Luther recant and take back his strongest criticisms. Luther found himself in a terrible position when he was called to stand before the church and answer. If he did what they wanted, there'd be peace, but everything would continue as it always had. The changes he desperately believed in would die. On the other hand, if he did not give in to their demands, he knew that he may well lose his life. He had no guarantee that his stand would ultimately change anything. Many other reformers had already been put to death before him. In that moment, it would have been easy to say, let someone else make a stand. I've too much to lose. Perhaps we've had the same thoughts run through our head when we face these moments of standing up or staying quiet. There are times when we might need to stand up with courage and speak up. Perhaps there's an unjust decision that affects other people which only you know about, or there's an uneasy silence in the room as many people think something should be said, but nobody wants to be the one to say it. We all recognize the chilling moments of decision where we know instinctively that someone should raise their voice. And then the battle inside rages over whether or not we will be that someone, the hope that someone else will do it, the fear when the silence extends itself. It's not easy sometimes to be the one willing to be bold because you dare to speak up for the disadvantaged, or to raise your hand and speak up when others are strangely silent. There's a challenge for us in our world to be brave enough to have an opinion, with a humble heart, not thinking we have everything down, but retaining the courage to ask questions, to speak up when we feel there is injustice or a wrong. We might like to think someone else will stand up, but we forget that in passing off the chance to act, we lessen our own strength and belief in who we are and in what we believe to be right and beautiful and worth standing for. Let's learn to be people of courage, people who speak up when a voice is needed, people others can count on and rely on to be seeking what's right, even at our own cost, even when nobody else sees the conversations or the cost. At times we need someone to show us the way, to speak loudly with courage, and to show us that speaking up is not just worthwhile, but absolutely critical to our humanity. Luther is one such figure, a man of many faults. This was a man who angered his father by rejecting the legal profession his father had worked so hard to make possible for him. A man whose personal hygiene was so appalling that when he finally got married, his wife remarked that his straw bed had not been changed in a year. A man who upset countless others and whose anti-Semitic ideas were used by the Nazis. This was no perfect person. He was a man of the people, a man who had a brewery on his land and whose rude table talk was infamous. He was a man of brilliant and dangerous ideas, but absolutely a man who stood for what he believed to be true, to be central to humanity's health and future. As he stood up for what he believed in, he would have cast his mind back to Christ standing before Pilate and the Jewish council. As Jesus stood before the power of his day and was asked to justify who he was and what he stood for, here was another man faced with a desperate choice. The choice to stand up for humanity, for truth, for love, and risk losing everything, including his life, or to take the easier way out and save himself. Christ chose to stand and bear the horrific weight of whatever was thrown at him, including the very real prospect of torture and cruel execution, because he saw worth in humanity, in who we are, in what makes us people. Luther chose to follow Christ's example and reminds us to look beyond just our individual perspective and see the wider good. The challenge he extends to us today remains just as powerful 500 years on as it was in his lifetime. It seems fitting to end with his own words. Luther said, "I'm more afraid of my own heart than of the Pope and all his cardinals. I have within me the great Pope, self." Be a sinner and sin strongly, but more strongly have faith and rejoice in Christ. To be a Christian without prayer is no more possible than to be alive without breathing. Faith is a living, daring confidence in God's grace, so sure and certain that a man could stake his life on it 1,000 times. This video is called Courage to Stand, because Luther reminds us that there are times when we will need to stand up, to have the courage to be the people who speak up and stand up for things that matter. As we go into our days, let's remember that challenge of Luther. Let's remember that we can be also people who make a difference in our world, and we have the courage to stand and speak up.
Face the waves. I don't wanna be afraid. I don't wanna be afraid. I don't wanna feel the storm just because I hear it roar. I don't wanna feel the storm. I don't wanna feel the storm. Peace, be still, say the word. Let faith rise up, oh heart, believe. Let faith rise up in me. Let faith rise up, oh heart, believe. Let faith rise up in me. Lift your voice tonight. Let faith rise up, oh heart, believe. Let faith rise up in me. Oh, let faith rise up, oh heart, believe. Let see.